What's happening, everybody? On today's show, the transfer portal is closing. Some more SEC names on the move. We'll get you the latest there. And revenue sharing with student athletes. Locked On SEC starts right now.
You are Locked On SEC, your daily podcast on the Southeastern Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And what's happening, everybody? Welcome into Locked On SEC. It's great to have you guys along on today's show. We'll hit on the latest with the transfer portal and that big revenue sharing with student athletes being proposed and becoming more of a reality. We'll touch on all that. I'm Chris Gordy. Thanks for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Shout out to our everydayers. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. And this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more right now. New customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. All right. Only one more day of the transfer portal being open. I'm sure a lot of you may be saying, okay, enough with the portal. Well, good news for you. It's about to close. So if you don't get your name in the portal by today, you are stuck at your current school for the fall. Now, as Matt Zenitz reports, a transfer portal reminder. He said, while today is technically the last day of the portal cycle, there will still be players popping up in the portal through later this week, because today is the last day for players to submit paperwork to enter, but then schools have 48 hours to process the entry. So there may be names we don't find out about until, Wednesday, Thursday, maybe even Friday. So Zenitz also writes, despite being presented like grad transfers will now have the same deadline to enter the portal as undergrads. Remember that came out last week? He said that's not the case. Grad transfers will have an extra day and can still enter the portal through the end of the day, Wednesday, according to 24/7 Sports. So grad transfers, you get an extra day, but everybody else, you got to be in the portal by today. You don't have to pick your new school. You just have to be in the portal to be able to move. And by the way, that SEC rule, if you're in the SEC currently and you enter the portal today, you cannot go to another SEC school and be eligible for the fall. You got to go to another conference. So, all right, let's dive into the latest SEC-related names to enter the transfer portal. And how about a guy coming over to Alabama, coming over to the SEC? It is Charlotte defensive back Kameron Howard. He announced his commitment to the Crimson Tide on Twitter on Monday. He's 5'11", 189 pounds, entered his name into the transfer portal on Saturday and is heading to the Alabama Crimson Tide. He played in all 12 games last year with 2 starts as a true freshman last year, totaling 38 tackles, 1 pass break, also registered 2 interceptions coming in back-to-back games, and those were his first 2 collegiate starts. So good ball skills from the young man, but he will have 3 years of eligibility remaining. He had several FBS offers out of high school, including Buffalo, when current Alabama defensive backs coach Maurice Linguist was the head coach there. But Howard will be Alabama's 3rd transfer portal addition of the spring, joining kicker Graham Nicholson from Miami of Ohio, who was one of the best kickers the last few years, and then returning offensive tackle Caden Proctor, who was once at Alabama, left for Iowa this offseason, now coming back to Alabama. But Bama's also lost a couple of players, including center James Brockermeyer and defensive lineman Curtis Perry. But this is a big pickup here in Cam Howard, because Alabama's safety position this spring was led by 5th-year senior Malachi Moore and the junior Keon Sabb, who transferred in from Michigan, with 4th-year junior Devontae Smith and freshman Red Morgan competing for the Husky role as the 5th defensive back. The Tide's backup safeties this spring were sophomores Bray Hubbard and Tony Mitchell. Drake Kirkpatrick Jr. also in the mix, but Howard will give them depth at safety. He can also contribute on special teams, and defensive back was a key area that Kalen DeBoer said they needed to address. He did say, I like the guys we have, very confident in those guys, but look, obviously you can never get enough names back there. And Alabama also hosted Arizona State transfer corner Ed Woods on a visit this past weekend. But welcome Kameron Howard to Tuscaloosa. He'll be a big piece there for them, especially with losing Cale Downs this offseason to Ohio State. Also at Alabama, they will lose another player. Yesterday, freshman defensive back Peyton Woodyard entered the transfer portal. He just went through spring practice with the Tide after being an early enrollee. Was a true freshman there, going to be a true freshman there, but he will be on the move already. 4 years of eligibility remaining. According to On3 Sports, he entered the portal with a do not contact tag. He was a 4-star prospect, was the number 128 overall recruit in this 2024 cycle, according to On3 Sports. And he was once committed to Georgia, decommitted, and eventually picked Alabama. Now, again, with the spring portal restriction on the SEC, he can't transfer to another SEC school without having to sit out next year. So we'll see where he ends up. But went through bowl practices with Alabama as they prep for their semifinal against Michigan in the Rose Bowl. But Peyton Woodyard on the move. All right, other news. Over at Arkansas, they're losing one of their running backs. Depth in the backfield. Running back Dominique Johnson has entered the transfer portal. Johnson played in 10 games last season for the Razorbacks, running 31 times for 167 yards with a touchdown, but spent 4 seasons with the Hogs. First got there in 2020. He's 6'1", 250 pounds. As a redshirt freshman in 2021, he had 97 carries for almost 600 yards and a team-high 7 touchdowns. Also caught 7 passes for 71 yards and a score. Suffered a knee injury during the Razorbacks' win over Penn State in the Outback Bowl. But, majority of his production came in that 2021 season. Did suffer 2 knee injuries that required surgery. Came back for 4 games in 2022, but re-injured that same knee in the Arkansas's 8th game against Auburn. So Dominique Johnson was, nice productive backup running back there for Arkansas, but he's entering the portal. He'll be on the move. We'll see where he ends up. And again, won't be at an SEC school. Over at Ole Miss, they are losing wide receiver Zakhari Franklin. He is entering the portal. Only played in 4 games last year with the Rebels. Started his career at UTSA, and, man, he was super productive at UTSA. Back in 2021, had 1,000 yards receiving and 12 touchdowns. And then in 2022, had over 1,100 yards and 15 touchdowns for UTSA. And 4-year starter there at UTSA, had high expectations coming into Ole Miss, but like we said, appeared in just 4 games for him last year at 4 catches for 38 yards and 1 touchdown. But he had entered the past couple of seasons on the Biletnikoff Award watch list, and a lot of people thought he was going to contribute there, but he was on the move. And so Ole Miss, look, they already have a super deep wide receiving core with Trey Harris back, Jordan Watkins, Juice Wells transferring in from South Carolina, Deion Smith coming in from community college. And then you combine that with tight ends Caden Priestcorn and then the Virginia Tech transfer Daquan Wright. Jackson Dart still going to have plenty of weapons to throw the ball to, but Zakhari Franklin on the move, many years at UTSA, 1 year at Ole Miss, and now on the move again. Over at Mississippi State, defensive lineman Wilkie Denaud has re-entered the transfer portal. He started his career at Auburn last year, spent 2023 at Auburn, transferred at the end of the year to Mississippi State, or committed to Mississippi State in January, but he's leaving the Bulldog program without ever having played a game there. He also did not play in a game last year in his time on the Plains with Auburn. But 6'4", 295 pounds. He did face some legal issues early this past season. Back in September, he was arrested and charged with larceny. He reportedly stole a scooter that was valued at $600. He was released hours after being arrested and posted his bond. So we'll see where Wilkie Denaud ends up. Also, Mississippi State basketball center Jimmy Bell has entered the transfer portal, but for football. He's 6'10", 280 pounds, made 16 starts for Mississippi State in basketball, but spent the spring working out with the football team as an offensive tackle. So interesting move there. We'll see where Jimmy Bell ends up. Over at Tennessee, defensive back Cristian Conyer entered the portal, announcing on social media, "I've entered the transfer portal, have 3 years of eligibility remaining. Want to thank Coach Heupel and the University of Tennessee and the chance to play in the SEC." He was a 3-star prospect coming out of high school last year, played in 10 games with 1 tackle in his lone season at Tennessee, most of his playing time on special teams. But he becomes the 4th player to enter the portal this spring, joins linebacker Elijah Herring, defensive lineman Cameron Douglas, and cornerback Malik Ganaway. Now, Cristian Conyer, it was a pretty heated recruiting battle between Kentucky and Tennessee for his services. But again, to go back to it. If he wants to go to Kentucky, which was originally on his list of schools coming out of high school, he would have to sit out next year in order to do that because you can't go to another SEC school. And by the way, I've had people asking about that, why is Greg Sankey being steadfast in that? From my understanding, it's not Greg Sankey's rule. Like the coaches asked him, said, this is what we want. And so he's just, kind of like Roger Goodell works for the owners. Greg Sankey, ultimately, he oversees the SEC, but he also listens to what his coaches' concerns are and what his coaches want. And the SEC coaches said, look, if a kid enters the portal in December, he can go wherever he wants. Wants to go to a SEC school for the spring, that's fine. But post-spring, no, you're not going to another SEC school because you already got our playbook. You already know what our team looks like for this coming year. I get why they're doing it, but they are the only conference to do it, right? I don't know of any other conference that's holding guys to that standard. But again, it's not necessarily a Greg Sankey rule. This is what the coaches want. This is what Kirby Smart wants and Brian Kelly and so on and so forth down the list. All right, thank you guys for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Coming up next, we'll get to that big story that came out yesterday from ESPN. Revenue sharing with student athletes on the precipice of coming in the future. We'll discuss that here in just a second. More Locked On SEC right after this. But first, remind you guys, this episode presented to you by our friends over at Game Time. Game Time is the authorized ticket marketplace of the NBA and the MLB. It makes getting playoff tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer you get to tip-off throughout these NBA playoffs. They got killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee. Game Time taking the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets, MLB tickets, whatever it is. And, of course, with priority, you get last-minute deals. Save up to 60% off buying last minute for sporting events or concerts, whatever it is you need. They got it. They also have flash deals. You save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or event. And they got zone deals. You save even more when you choose a section and let Game Time choose the seats for you. Go take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use our code LOCKEDONCollege to get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem our code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. It is last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. I also want to remind you this episode presented to you by our friends at FanDuel. It is playoff time in the NBA, in NHL. Baseball season is in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers, we've been telling you about it. Look, you get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That is $150, win or lose. Bet on everything from home runs, slap shots, slam dunks, whatever it is, all on an app that is safe, secure, and super easy to use. I got some buddies who bet on baseball every single night. I got some other buddies who are doing the NBA every single night with the NBA playoffs. There's something going on every single night in the sports world. So what are you waiting for? Go visit FanDuel.com/lockedon today and make your first bet an automatic win. Again, sign up today at FanDuel.com/lockedon. Get signed up, get your account set up, take advantage of that $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. They are FanDuel. They are America's #1 sports book. Go check them out today. All right, roll along here, Locked On SEC. Thank you guys for making us your first listen every day. Shout out to our everydayers. Come on back tomorrow on the show and check us out. And hey, reminder, you can check out the Locked On Sports Today page up on YouTube and on the free Fire TV channels app. Check it out for all the latest news going on around the sports world. All right, we got to dive into this story as, according to an ESPN report, there are deep discussions regarding a legal settlement that will give NCAA athletes revenue sharing. And this is all coming on the backs of NIL antitrust class action lawsuit against the NCAA in Washington, D.C. The leaders of college sports are involved in deep discussions to reach a legal settlement that would likely lay out the framework for revenue sharing with athletes in a future NCAA business model. That's according to the ESPN report with Pete Thamel and Dan Murphy. Now, as ESPN goes on to say, the NCAA is going up against the House, saying they're breaking the law by potentially placing restrictions on how much money student athletes can earn from name, image, and likeness. The case is scheduled to go to court in January of next year, but a lot of people think a settlement could come, and that would certainly change things. The NCAA and conferences, according to reports, could be facing $4 billion in damages, something ESPN says has made them willing to speed up the process of settling this case. The deal is not close to being completed, but the revenue sharing model could be presented shortly. And the details still need to be sorted out, but ESPN says the top end revenue share could be around $20 million per school. Now, again, this all depends on what kind of revenue that school brings in. But schools would then choose exactly how much of that percentage they would give to their student athletes. They would have the opportunity to lower the number if they would like, but they cannot go over that. Now, Ross Dellinger of Yahoo Sports, he's been tracking this for months and months and months. And he says, look, college leaders have been in discussion to settle this house case for months now, with any settlement tied to a future athlete compensation model that features sharing revenue with athletes, has been reported over the last couple of months. So, look, this is very unique because we talk about NIL, right? The school can't be involved. You got to get the collective involved. It's got to be donors. It's got to be businesses. It's got to be all this separate stuff. But this is the first thing that would really, if this were to happen, where the school could literally, they would have a pool of money, however much money they decide it is, like they said, somewhere in the $20 million range, possibly per school. And then the school could then choose how much of that they give to their athletes and how do they disperse it. I've heard this idea in the past, let's say you're from Michigan and you're playing college football at Alabama and you come from a single parent home and you don't have much money. And I don't know, Christmas break hits and everybody's going back home for Christmas and you don't have many funds to go back home. Why couldn't the school then give you an allowance or money to be able to travel back to go spend time with your family for Christmas or whatever the case is? It could be that. It could be a pool of money that the school pulls from and gives to certain student athletes. It could be everybody gets the same, and this is where we get into the Title IX discussion as well. Does this include, if you're giving it to the football team, you got to give it to the track team and the swimming and diving team and the gymnastics team and all this. So, if it's $20 million per school and several thousand athletes, is the juice worth the squeeze there? Well, some people would say any kind of shared revenue is a step forward, right? I mean, student athletes are the stars of the sport, and the NCAA and schools have been profiting for many years, so why not spread the wealth a little bit to those people? I don't know. Could be fascinating to see how this plays out, but this is the first real essence of revenue sharing between the NCAA, schools, conferences with the actual student athletes. And, does this go down a darker road of, becoming actual employees where you get forget stipend and scholarship. You're a worker and here's your contract and you sign on to play with us for the next 3 years. And here's your base salary. And that's that. Some people think that's where we're trending toward. And, is that a better model? I'm sure the coaches might actually like that. Oh, you got to sign a contract. I got you in your letter of agreement in writing that you're going to be here for the next 3 years. Great. Don't have to worry about the transfer portal. So anyway, I don't know if it'll get to that, but that's just been some of the stuff that's been talked about. But this seems very real that, again, they want to settle this, the NCAA and, fighting with the House there in DC. And again, part of the fallout from this would be revenue sharing. So we'll see what happens. But that's the latest there. Report from ESPN and On3 Sports is on it. 24/7 Sports, they're all reporting it as well. So figured we would pass that along to you guys. All right, still more to come here on Locked On SEC, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. When we come back, we got transfer portal news on the hoop side. It's so crazy. I wish we could separate. I wish we could do the football transfer portal and then that closes and then do basketball, but they're crossing over and we got plenty of movement happening. So when we come back, we'll hit on SEC hoops and the transfer portal news that is coming your way here in just a sec. But first, all right, guys, game off. We got a pause here to talk about Monopoly Go. I know what you're saying, flag on the play. We've already talked about them, but there is so much good stuff going on in the game. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with friends for time tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock, and there's so much to get. You got unique stickers you can trade with friends to complete albums for bigger prizes. cool new playing pieces to travel the boards with, hilarious emojis for taunting friends when you smash their buildings or heist their vaults. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton include their own unique mini games like digging for treasure or a robot pachinko machine. There's also new timed events that help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go. So go get off the bench and download it now for free on Google Play or the App Store. Game on with Monopoly Go. All right, continue on here, Locked On SEC. Trying out some new music here for those of you guys listening. Got to get into transfer portal news when it comes to the basketball side of things. We're already hit on the football side, but let's head over to the basketball side of things as we start over at Arkansas. Man, John Calipari has been making some moves as of late. He's been picking up some big-time recruits and hitting that transfer portal and certainly making some noise when it comes to the basketball side of things. But former Tennessee center Jonas Aidoo has committed to Arkansas. He entered the transfer portal, and his commitment was reported by CBS Sports. But Jonas Aidoo averaged 11 points and 7 rebounds per game last year as he helped lead Tennessee to the Elite Eight in the NCAA tournament. Aidoo was also a really good defensive player, averaged close to 2 shots blocked per game, solid rim protector, 6'11", 240 pounds. His improvement over the last 3 years has been great. He went from averaging 2 points and 2 rebounds as a freshman to 5 points and 5 rebounds as a sophomore to 11.4 points and 7.3 rebounds as a junior. So he's a former 4-star prospect, number 40 overall player in the nation in the 2021 class. Checked in as the number 7 center in the class, number 1 overall player in the state of North Carolina, and he picked Tennessee. It's been a nice contributor for Tennessee this last couple of years, but he's going to play for John Calipari over at Arkansas. All right, how about Kentucky transfer center Ugonna Onyeso? I never get this right. Just call him Ugonna. That's what Calipari told me last year during March Madness. But he's got expert predictions out there from On3 and several others that he is expected to land at Alabama. Ugonna originally declared for the NBA draft and then announced he was not returning to college basketball, but then entered the transfer portal not too long after that. And it looks like, again, won't be at Kentucky. He will have 2 years of eligibility remaining, and looks like he is going to Alabama. Last year, started 14 games for Kentucky, averaged 3.5 points, 4.5 rebounds, 2.5 blocks in 19 minutes per game over 2 seasons in Lexington there. But when he initially declared for the draft, he told ESPN he wanted to show NBA scouts that he has an offensive game, despite making only 18 shots last season. No 3-pointers. But Ugonna, we'll wait for the official word there, but looking like he is going to end up over at Alabama playing for Nate Oates. And speaking of Alabama forward Grant Nelson, choosing to return to the Tide for next season, will utilize his additional year of eligibility. Last season, he averaged 11.9 points and 5.9 rebounds per game for the Tide. He was very important during their run to the Final Four, where they eventually fell to UConn. But after that loss, he spoke about the motivation it would provide him for his future and kind of dropped a hint that he would be back next season. Nelson had said at the time, great group. I mean, I feel like we all loved each other. It was tough seeing guys like Aaron Estrada play their last basketball game. We just told each other we made history, didn't end the way we wanted. We can't hang our heads on this season. We have to use this game as motivation going into next year. That's what he said after they lost to UConn. So the writing was on the wall. He was going to come back. But Nelson and company going to run it back. And it's been a great offseason for Alabama basketball. They have had a fantastic recruiting class and pieces in the transfer portal. And seems like they're not done yet. But congrats to Grant Nelson. Going to run it back with Alabama for another year. And one more nugget in here, another player potentially for Kentucky, BYU small forward Jackson Robinson has officially entered the NCAA transfer portal. He averaged 14 points per game this past season. So that's a name to keep an eye on there. Obviously played for Mark Pope there at BYU. So Jackson Robinson, keep an eye on him. But Andrew Carr, who played at Wake Forest the past 2 seasons, he committed to Kentucky this week. In 2 years with the Demon Deacons, he averaged 12 points, 6.4 rebounds, 1 assist and 1 block per game last season. He started all 35 games for Wake Forest. Carr started his career at Delaware, where he played 2 seasons before the last 2 at Wake Forest, but he's the 6th player joining Kentucky's roster for next season. It's a group that includes 2024 signee Travis Perry, who was the all-time leading scorer in Kentucky high school history, former BYU commit Colin Chandler, and then transfers Lamont Butler from San Diego State, Otega Owe from Oklahoma, and Amari Williams from Drexel. And now you get Andrew Carr from Wake Forest, and like I said, keep an eye on Jackson Robinson from BYU. It's just going to be weird. One, it's going to be weird to see Mark Pope at Kentucky and not John Calipari. And it's going to be weird to see this Kentucky roster because it's going to be all new guys. Just, get used to it. You're going to have to buy a program your first game at Rupp to get used to knowing this new group. Well, I guess I'll do Big Blue Madness and all that first. You get to know them. But look, no different than what it's been in Kentucky. I mean, Calipari basically turned over the whole roster every year anyway. So, with all the one and dones. But yeah, new age of Kentucky, going to be weird seeing all new faces. They're going to be weird seeing John Calipari wearing a red sports coat and coaching at Arkansas. And again, big time getting Jonas Adu from Tennessee to add his group over there at Arkansas. So it'll be an interesting offseason. Going to be an interesting season for SEC hoops. I've had some people say they think Auburn and Alabama are the 2 most loaded teams going into next year. Obviously, Tennessee coming off of a great run. Kentucky with a lot of high hopes. We'll see what Texas and Oklahoma bring to the mix, joining the conference. So it'll be an interesting year. Florida had an arrow pointing upward. Mississippi State. It's just Texas A&M. There's just a lot of good teams in SEC hoops. We'll see what it looks like next year. Hey, thank you guys for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Shout out to everydayers. Calling back tomorrow on the show. We're going to talk with we're going to run through an article our buddy Brad Crawford wrote where he gave the SEC power rankings following spring practice, and we'll see where he has all the SEC teams ranked there. But hey, for your second listen, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts at Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available on the free Fire TV channels app. I'm Chris Gordy. This has been Locked On SEC. We will talk to you guys tomorrow.